Hi, it's 4:15 on Friday. I'm Jill Wolcott of Jill Wolcott Knits, and I am here to talk about nerdy knitting. So while Instagram does its magic to round up people, I have a couple of other things that I can discuss. Okay, so I made this Mobius as a swatch for a project, which I have since decided I don't like. And so the pullover has to be taken apart, which I started, and I want to take this apart so I can use it for the next swatch, because I love this yarn, and the dyer is out of business. So I'm trying to look here. I am so good at closing the gap. I think this may be where it started. It is. I've been poking at it. I finally got an end to pop out. I'm very good at ends, and I'm very good at closing the gap, excuse me, on my JSSBO or any bind off in the round. So I have a little trick that I do, and you can find it out. Oh, look at that. There's Lucinda. And ridiculously tiny things. You will never see me doing that. Hi, Lucinda. I'm not into ridiculously tiny things. Although we do have something we call the Tiny Pot Collection. And we were going down to Santa Fe for several years, and Mitch really liked the pots, but good ones are very expensive, and he doesn't really wear jewelry, so I have some jewelry, and so he started buying tiny pots, and he was really not, I gotta quit doing this or I will become obsessed. He was not concerned about ultimate quality, although he did buy a couple from really nice artisans. So we do have the Tiny Pot Collection. Anyhow, nerdy knitting. So my absolute favorite, and that's saying something because I have like 3 or 4 things that I'm really fond of, would have to be the flexible long tail cast on, which was invented by me when I misread the instructions for June Hyatt's double needle cast on. And although it was a variation of that, she told me she didn't want me to use that name. So I came up with flexible long tail cast on. It's done using 2 needles, and the way it's different, and by 2 needles, let me see, let me grab something large enough that you can see. So you hold 2 needles like this, and you can do it like I've done here with just 2 ends of a circular needle, or you can do it like this, and you can use like 2 differently sized needles. So this one is a 3, and this one looks like it's a 4.5, so 7. So if I wanted a more flexible cast on, and I didn't want it to be too loose, I can vary the bottom needle size, and that will, so here's a 2.75, I put paint on my nail colors on my needles so I can easily tell what they are. I don't have an unfinished cast on here. Yes, I do. Here's a cast on. Oh, and I've got another little trick here. So you can see how flexible it is. So it's just like the long tail, except that when you do your slingshot, again, let me get some yarn. You would think I would get prepared, but I never know where my brain's going to go. So let's say you have your yarn like this, and for the long tail you would just go like that. So for the double needle, you do the long tail, and you're only grabbing with one needle, and then at the very end you drop the thumb loop onto the bottom needle. So now I have a loop up here. I actually have the two that I did with the long tail, and then that loop, and then you just repeat for the number of stitches. Okay, so there I am. I've got 3 flexible long tail and 2 long tails. So I'm going to take out this bottom needle, and okay, so here's the long tail, and they don't stretch very far, but these stretch and are uniformly spaced because of the needle. So I remember Kat Bordy calling this crocodile casting on. Don't ask me why. But you have to gauge how far apart to do them. And so the needle is just creating that spacing. So anyhow, I love the flexible long tail cast on. I use it for all my swatches because I don't want the cast on constricting the bottom. And I always bind off with JSSBO, which is one of the other things that's on my list of favorite things, favorite techniques. And yeah, so if you want to find it, just type in flexible long tail on my website, or go to my menu of techniques and it will pull it up. There is a video, and there is a video on how I close the gap at the end when you're working on the round. So that is probably my favorite, but I also love short rows. I love short rows kind of more than any other structural technique. So let's see, I have a shawl here. I have 2 shawls. So this one, which I started, I was going to tell you the other little trick. So when you can't remember where the beginning is, if you put a couple of little beads there, and yes, JSSBO, it's the Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy cast bind off. So I usually would put the beads down here, but my knitter put them up there. It just helps you see where, when you're putting it on. So back to short rows. This, I call these cozies. You just drop them over your shoulders, and you can see that there's variations in the length. So that was created with, hi Iris, short rows to make it so that you have probably had this experience. Now where did my beads go? Let's get it right side out. I'll pop this on. This is pretty big on me. But so you'd make something like this, and this can happen on yoke sweaters as well. So it's too short in the back when it fits in the front. So this is done, so let's see if my shoulder will allow me to reach up. And it will, because I've actually no longer have any pain. So it allows the front and the back to be the same length by putting short rows in the back like you do on a yoke sweater. And I've done a lot of research on yokes, and I have some thoughts, but I won't share them today. So here's another example of short rows where I wanted the bottom to be longer than the top, and this is knit from the cast on to the bind off that way. So I'm working rows back and forth. So you can see that this is longer and it's working short rows, and you can see here that there's like 2 garter rows between the seafoam, the elongated stitches, and then there are places where there's more garter ridges, and so that's where the short rows are happening, and it makes it so, let's see if I can get this the wrong way. Here's something else I can now do because my shoulder doesn't hurt anymore, so that it isn't too big around the neck but has plenty of room down here. And this is about as frilly as I get. I'm not a big, ruffles look terrible on me. Anyhow, so that's short rows. I've also at one point did a whole bunch of stuff on socks. I do not knit socks. I have no interest in wearing hand-knitted socks, and I can't ever make 2 of them the same size anyhow. But I got really interested in just the short row aspect of the heel, and I wanted to take it into garments, but socks were a really convenient place to try that out. So and I may have knit 1 or 2 of these socks, but mostly they were knit. So trying to find a light colored one. So the heel is actually, it's short rowed and then short rowed again. So it accommodates a heel better. Let's see, so here's 1 row of short rows. I think of it as kind of a V short row instead of just a single. Like I said, I could not bear to knit these. I could not knit as tight as you would need to knit these. So somebody else knitted them for me. Here's a really pretty one, just using leftovers of these yarns. So this one I did, there's a little bit of short rowing in the bottom just so that when you're wearing it, it is longer on the bottom than on the top. What else do I have in here? This is all things for feet and legs, so I may have knit one of these. This is like my speed, except I think it's too well knitted for me to have done it. So I started this with Judy's Magic cast on, and then worked short rows for the toe, and again, so you've got 1 row there, another row there, and there's a little bit of short row, so the bottom is. So anyhow, that's my, here's a footy. Here's another one. This one has an interesting heel. I think I told my knitter she could do whatever she wanted. And she loves to knit socks and knits them at a very fine gauge. So this is fun. Haven't seen this hat for quite a while. Long before bucket hats were popular, I made this child's hat. So let's see. Then the other thing that I'm very particular about my increases. So I don't do a make one. Never. Hate it. I do lifted increases, but lifting from either the next stitch or the row below, depending on if I need to go right or left. And so I think those are really good increases because they don't show. If it just doesn't matter, I might do a front and back. But mostly I do lifted increases. And I always do them in pattern. So another thing I love to do is the flat 3-needle bind off. So if you have ever done a 3-needle bind off, and I don't have a ready sample, it tilts towards the knit side. Which that makes no sense. Well, so you knit front and back to do the 3-needle bind off. So you knit through the front stitch, and then you knit the back stitch and pull it through. Okay, so the side that is facing you when you're knitting, the bind off tilts towards that side. So on a shoulder, it kind of throws things off. And I took a class, it was called Knitting from the Outside In, I think, 1,000 years ago, more like 1996. And this lovely woman taught it, and she had it working from the outside to the inside, but it was a rectangle, so you needed to bind off quite a row of stitches as you got there, as you got to the middle. And she showed us the flat 3-needle bind off. I don't know what she called it. Blew my mind, and I've used it ever since. She died shortly thereafter, and I can't remember her name. Isn't that horrible? So I guess make sure people know your name before you die. Here's another thing that I just find incredibly fun and satisfying. So you knit, and then you take the stitches out to make the fringe. So you get looped fringe, or you can cut it and make it flat fringe. This one, it was not, I was working up, so you're knitting the length, and it's the stitches you take out going this way that create the fringe. So I had to knit something and attach it. Actually, I think I probably just joined this and knit 6 stitches, which seems to work in like most weights of yarn to be about the proportion you want. I put beads at the end of these, but I tied the beads on later, and it looks like I put a bead on every single one of these. I don't know. That's not really like me. And then it looks like I worked a bead in while I was doing this scalloped trim at the beginning. So there's a free pattern for this on my website. It's called the Chinchero hat, Chinchero. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. And I adapted it from traditional technique in this, I don't know what you call them, indigenous community in Peru. And I found an article in the Textile Journal years ago, and I was kind of fascinated by it, but it was done on really small yarn, and I thought, oh, at that point, Americans would not have knit on that. So I converted it to worsted, and the woman had written out lovely instructions for this cute scallop that were very hard to follow, so I rewrote them. Here's one. So I don't wear hats. I look terrible in them, but sometimes when it's cold I need something, but I've got so much hair on the top of my head and I have hot flashes, so I tend to wear topless hats. And here's another one I did, and yeah, I don't know what overcame me. I put all these buttons on. They should definitely be taken off. But this I twisted every strand. I used a metal double point, and so I twisted. I am maniacal about things, but if it doesn't interest me, you cannot make me do it. So like tiny stitches doesn't interest me. So I twisted it like this, and I kept doing it and putting them up on my double point. And then when I had as many as I could reasonably hold there, I steamed it so that the twist would hold. You can see some of the button I think has pulled this out. So, but I think the buttons should come off of this. And again, I put them on by just, I'm taking one out right now. Looks like I pulled the loop through the button and then looped it over the yarn, so it'll be a bit of a challenge to get out. I'm very good at finishing, which is very bad when you need to take something out. Okay, so then in terms of finishing, this is not sitting on me correctly today. I love the mattress stitch. Don't love sewing pieces together, but I find the mattress stitch very satisfying. So I will, and Lucinda, I think you were talking about this the other day, that I will almost always do the entire body of a sweater. You almost always work top or bottom down, bottom up. I will cast on the whole body, even if I'm working flat, and work the body to the armholes in one piece. And then if I'm working in the round, I start the bind off like however many stitches is half the bind off into the beat at the end of the last round, so that I end up and my yarn is in place to work back and forth across the back. But you still have to, like if you've done a sleeve, you have to sew that on. And so I love the mattress stitch because it tends to come together so nicely. So those were like my favorite top 6 techniques, and I threw in a couple of others. This scallop is essentially short road. Love it. So this is a technique that I really like, but it's a little fussy and troublesome to do. So this is a picot edge, and so I cast on, and I'm pretty sure I used the flexible long tail, and then I ran waste yarn, or you can do one of these cords, through the bottom needle before I took the needle out. And what that does is it just helps you see where to pick up. So then I picked up and carried on. And I did the same thing. Of course, it didn't occur to me to look at the pattern. But I did a casing. I was going to put elastic in, and then I remembered that you can't do that to children's things. And I used Knit Two Together and SSK, and Lucinda commented today on my post on Substack about which SSK do you use. And so on my website, I think I give 4 different varieties. And I use different ones depending upon the yarn and the context. And none of them are better than the others. It's really just getting, no, it wasn't Sidna Farley. I think her last name started with a V. God, it's so bad. And so, what was I saying? Oh, I hate being old. Well, that's gone. Okay, so I've kind of gone through my techniques. Oh, it was the SSK and the Knit Two Together. Of course, we all love Knit Two Together because it's so easy. SSK, my website has 4 different explanations of how to do it. They are just very tiny bit different. And some of them will give a significantly different visual look depending upon your tension and your yarn. So I always test out on my swatch and try and figure out which one I'm going to use, because inevitably it will be used. So that takes care of techniques. And then I have some other notes here, and one of them is finishing. And no one likes to do it. And I used to think that people wanted to know how to do it better. And I would create workshops on finishing, and no one would come. Because it turns out that just no one wants to do any finishing. And they think that, I don't know what they think, but so I love the result of great finishing. So I will spend quite a bit of time figuring out what I want, what the result is going to be, and then how to execute it. The instructions in my patterns are quite lengthy for finishing. I think it's really unfair that people say, carry on. They don't really tell you what you're supposed to do. So I try and illustrate them if they're complicated. Another thing I feel strongly about, I guess we've kind of moved into that category, is knitting needles. So I use pretty much exclusively either Addi Turbos or these old Inox Express, that I think that was what they were called. Anyhow, they're like this. And I use almost exclusively circular needles. I love DPNs, but I have large hands, which are, my knuckles are getting bigger, and I've had a lot of wrist issues. So the motion of DPNs is not great. So I try and just keep it to the necessary part, and otherwise I use Magic Loop. I tried using 2 circulars, but I kept pulling out the other needle. I don't pay a lot of attention when I'm knitting, which is one of the reasons why I'm not a good sample knitter. But by the time I'm knitting in the evening, I just want the joy of knitting, and I'm happy to spend time figuring things out and fussing over them. But apparently I can't be held responsible of keeping track of 2 needles. I said the other day in Plan to Finish, I can't manage more than 1 ball of yarn without them all getting tangled up, so I hate doing that. I'm currently working on 2 projects that have more than 1 ball of yarn, and I just make myself stop and untangle them, but that's not what I want to do. So I use all metal needles. I don't like bamboo, I don't like wood, and I just want to go fast. So the pointier the better as far as I'm concerned, so I often am just using lace needles. And I'm a continental knitter. And when people say to me, what needles should I buy? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not doing your knitting. I think needles are so personal that you should always use what works for you, not what works for anybody else. And I just spotted this little short Brittany needle that the owner gave to me because I said I knit swatches, but I'm like, I don't ever use a straight needle. And they're lovely, but I find that because they don't move as fast, that again, they impact my wrists. So then I thought, well, we could talk about fiber and yarn, but I think we're running out of time. So one of the things that you should always think about, I'm not going to have time to expound upon it much, is kind of the roundness or flatness of your yarn. So the only other loose yarn I have is lace weight, 2-ply. This one is 3-ply, this yummy one. Almost all of the ones that I have on my desk. Oh, here's an interesting one. So how many times they're plied really impacts the ability to show texture. So this is, looks like it's either a 3 or a 4-ply. These are Malabrigo yarns. I think this one is a 4-ply, very round. And then this one, which I absolutely adore, it's called Dos Tierras, and it is 2-plied yarns plied together. So instead of just multiple plies, they plied this, it's a 2-ply, and they plied this, also a 2-ply, and then they have plied it together. And it's got just a little bit crunchier texture than this one. But they're both 4-plies. So this one feels light and airy. This one feels a little more substantial. So this one, the one I'm going to tear out, is a 1-ply. And I don't really love 1-ply for wearing because it tends to wear. But I also like the way stitches look in it. So sometimes, against my better judgment, I get involved in something using a 1-ply. It is getting on time to go to the music hour, see what Mitch is playing tonight. But I have a whole list of things here talking about the different stitches that I like. So I think I'll make that a separate ramble. So remember I said I don't do well with more than one ball of yarn. So these are all slip stitches where you do have multiple balls, but you only have to use one at a time. So the original pattern used stranded knitting. I don't do much of that. And so where was I going with that color? Oh, I mostly do texture, which, like the stuff that I've showed you tonight, hasn't really shown a lot of that. I love open stitches, so I do a lot of drop stitches and elongated stitches. This one here is an elongated stitch. I think this is the right way, which I've since modified a little bit, and I just made it up. So I don't know whether it exists someplace else. I was trying to get vertical stripes without any difficulty and without doing stranded knitting, and I'm quite pleased with this. So that's what I have this week. It has been a really rough week here at Jill Wolcott Knits. I don't know whether there's something in the air or what, but I've had a lot of trouble focusing, which is not usually a problem for me. And I have carried on, and I'm just giving myself a ton of credit for doing that. I think a lot of it is I don't sleep well, and it's been a little intense lately. So I am ramping up for the music hour. I think I'll work on some art buttons that got stalled out. And while I'm drinking my martini, I'm gonna take this apart, because then it won't bother me that all those unplied pieces of yarn are sticking to each other. So here, oh, I know something else I thought of that so I love doing a Mobius, and I just love the fact that you just keep going. And so this is a Mobius, and I can see my cast on. But I'm going to have to go the other way. So anyhow, I'll know when. And taking a Mobius out is just a bitch. There's nothing else to say about it. The yarn gets really tangled because of the Mobius, and then I've got two colors, and I'm going to have to pull them apart. So I always think like, oh, I'll just put it on my Swift and it'll go so well. Not so much. So I think I'll just do this while I'm having my martini tonight, and see what Mitch has planned. He's been playing some really beautiful piano jazz. Who would have ever thought that I would be at a point in my life where beautiful piano jazz was what I mostly wanted to listen to? But we do evolve with time. And I'm off. Have a great weekend. Bye.